The evening sun slid low over Los Angeles, spilling golden light across the marble steps of the Bel Air Club and Grill, where luxury was the dress code and wealth was the unspoken language. The valet line glittered like a showroom, sleek Teslas purred, Lamborghinis rumbled, and black SUVs gleamed under polished brass lanterns. Guests in gowns and tuxedos drifted past like they belonged to another world entirely. And then came the sound of a tired engine. A small, stubborn hum, followed by a cough of exhaust. Heads turned. A 2008 Toyota Corolla rolled forward, its faded silver paint dull from years of sun and rain. The contrast was almost painful, like a forgotten relic among diamonds. Inside, Emily Turner, 34, gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles blanched. Her throat tightened, but she forced her shoulders back. "You're not here for them. You're here for the auction. Walk tall, Emily." The valet jogged over, his polite smile faltering for just a beat. Still, he slid into the driver's seat, pulling the Corolla quickly out of sight, almost as though tucking it away like a secret no one wanted to see. And that was when she heard it. A laugh. Deep, deliberate. A sound she knew as well as her own heartbeat. "God, Emily," the voice called out. "Still driving that clunker? Didn't know they even let antiques in here." Her chest tightened. Slowly, she turned. There he was. Ryan Carter, her ex-husband, every inch the picture of smug success in a tailored Armani suit. His arm was looped around Sabrina Hale, his fiancée, whose glittering silver gown clung to her like a second skin. Sabrina's lips curved in a smile sharp enough to cut glass, and she pressed her manicured hand to Ryan's sleeve as if sealing her ownership. Emily froze, her pulse roaring in her ears. Ryan smirked, his gaze deliberately sweeping from her heels to her modest navy dress before landing back on her face. "Guess some things never change. I'm glad I upgraded." The words weren't casual, they were aimed, fired, and meant to wound. Sabrina leaned in, pretending to whisper but making sure every syllable carried. "Do you think it even makes it up Mulholland? Or does she have to push it the rest of the way?" Their laughter rang out like a slap, echoing off marble and steel. Heads turned, an older couple waiting for their Bentley frowned, and a young woman in sequins gave Emily a sympathetic glance. For a moment, Emily's resolve cracked. She felt heat rising in her cheeks, her hands trembling against the small clutch bag she carried. She wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the crowd, to be invisible. Why did I come here? Why did I think I belonged in this place again? But then, unbidden, another memory surfaced. 3 years ago, a different night. A half-empty house. Ryan walking out with a suitcase, muttering, "I need more than this." No explanations, no apologies. The faint scent of Sabrina's perfume had lingered in the hallway the next day. Emily had collapsed on the kitchen floor, sobbing until her voice was raw, wondering how she would raise her son when she could barely hold herself upright. And yet, she had. That little Corolla had carried her to job interviews, to night classes, to grocery stores with her son singing "Twinkle Twinkle" in the back seat. It had been there for Christmas mornings, doctor's appointments, late-night emergencies. That car wasn't junk. It was a lifeline. Emily swallowed hard, lifted her chin, and found her voice. Some things don't need to change. Reliability matters more than flash. Her words weren't loud, but they were steady. Ryan's smirk faltered, just for a second, before he chuckled and pulled Sabrina toward the entrance. Sabrina tossed her hair, whispering something else that sent them both laughing again. Emily exhaled, her chest heaving. Her dress suddenly felt too plain, her shoes too ordinary. Around her, guests floated into the club, sparkling and unbothered, while she stood rooted in place, fighting the weight of humiliation pressing against her ribs. The valet returned, offering her ticket with a quiet "Have a lovely evening, ma'am." His voice held warmth, a small kindness that steadied her for a moment. She gave him a grateful nod, tucked the ticket away, and straightened her back. Each step toward the glowing glass doors felt heavier than the last. Inside, crystal chandeliers and polished marble waited. So did Ryan and Sabrina. And so did the whispers that always followed her name, the one he left behind. Her thoughts spun, sharp and merciless. How many more times will I have to walk into rooms like this? How many more nights will I be reminded I wasn't enough? The laughter echoed behind her. She clenched her fists at her sides, willing her face into composure. And yet, beneath the shame, something else stirred. A fire. A reminder that she had already survived the worst night of her life. That humiliation was temporary, but resilience was permanent. Emily Turner might have arrived in an old Corolla, but life had a way of rewriting stories. And tonight, hers was only just beginning. The laughter that night outside the Billionaire Club didn't just sting, it reopened wounds Emily had worked years to scar over. Because once, Ryan Carter had been the man she trusted with everything. When Emily first met him, she was just 24, fresh out of college, waiting tables at a small restaurant in downtown Los Angeles while sending out resumes that never seemed to get a response. Ryan had walked in wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, his tie slightly crooked, but his smile? It had been dazzling. He tipped well, lingered after hours, and before long, he was showing up every other night until one evening he stayed until closing just to walk her home. Emily remembered the feeling, like someone had finally chosen her, out of all the noise and chaos of the city. They married 2 years later, small ceremony, nothing extravagant, just friends, family, and vows whispered with trembling hands. At first, things were good. Ryan worked long hours at a mid-level finance job, while Emily picked up freelance design projects from home. They scraped by, but they were a team. Until her grandmother passed away. It was sudden, heart failure at 72. Emily had been devastated, but she also inherited something unexpected, a modest trust fund, carefully built by her grandmother over decades. Not millions, not yachts and mansions money, but enough to matter. Enough to change their lives. That was the moment the first cracks appeared. Ryan insisted the money should go into their accounts. That it should be used for investments. For our future. Emily hesitated, but the way he said "our" made her feel guilty for questioning it. So she agreed. At first, it was little things, dinners at nicer restaurants, trips they couldn't have afforded before. But soon Ryan was coming home with expensive watches, clothes tailored in Beverly Hills, and talk of networking events with people she'd never met. Emily tried to convince herself it was fine. Wasn't this what her grandmother wanted? For her life to get easier? But the easier things got for Ryan, the harder they became for her. He was gone more. Colder. Distracted. And then one night, she noticed a faint trace of perfume on his shirt collar. Not hers. When she asked, he laughed. Actually laughed. "You're imagining things, Emily. Don't go crazy on me." But she wasn't crazy. The messages came next. Accidentally left open on their shared laptop. Dozens of them, full of words she hadn't heard in years, pet names, promises, late-night confessions, all written not to her, but to Sabrina. The woman who now stood at his side, mocking her Corolla. Emily remembered that night with unbearable clarity, the confrontation, his denial at first, then the sudden shift to anger. And finally, the confession. "I need more than this. More than you." He packed a suitcase before sunrise. And just like that, the man she thought she'd spend her life with was gone. Emily collapsed in the kitchen that night, the house too quiet, her body shaking with sobs. She felt hollow, like the air had been sucked from the room. How was she supposed to raise a child alone when she could barely hold herself together? Because by then, there was another life in the picture. Their son, Nathan, only 2 years old, with big brown eyes and a laugh that made her forget, even for a moment, the weight crushing her chest. Nathan was the reason she got up the next morning. And the morning after that. She filed for divorce with trembling hands. Ryan didn't fight, it was as if he'd been waiting for her to do it. But what he did fight for was money. Her grandmother's inheritance, the very thing he'd been circling from the beginning. The court battle was brutal. His attorney painted her as unstable, unfit, incapable of managing finances. Emily had sat in that courtroom, her hands cold, her voice shaking, as Ryan's lies spilled out one after another. But in the end, the judge had seen through him. The inheritance was ruled Emily's alone, protected by documents her grandmother had signed years ago. Ryan walked away furious, muttering under his breath about starting over with someone better. That someone better was Sabrina. Emily, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces. The house they'd shared was sold, the money divided, and she moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment with Nathan. The trust fund kept them afloat, but Emily refused to touch more than the bare minimum. Every dollar felt like a reminder, not just of her grandmother's sacrifice, but of Ryan's betrayal. For months, Emily drifted through life like a ghost. She went through the motions, packing Nathan's lunches, walking him to daycare, picking up freelance projects, but the fire inside her had dimmed to embers. Until one morning, as she watched her son coloring at the kitchen table, his tongue poking from the corner of his mouth in concentration, something shifted. He looked up at her, grinning, and said, "Mommy, you're strong." Strong. The word cut through her like sunlight through storm clouds. It wasn't about Ryan anymore. It wasn't about what she had lost. It was about Nathan, and the future he deserved. About proving to herself that she was more than the broken woman sobbing on a kitchen floor. From that day forward, Emily began to rise. Slowly. Painfully. But she rose. And though she didn't know it then, that rise would eventually carry her into places Ryan Carter could never have imagined. Because humiliation, as cruel as it felt in the moment, was never the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Emily didn't wake up one morning magically healed. Rebuilding wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 little choices, most of them exhausting, some of them humiliating, but all of them necessary. At first, it was about survival. The apartment she and Nathan moved into was small, a far cry from the townhouse she once decorated with Pinterest-perfect vision boards and late-night paint projects. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, a kitchen counter chipped in 3 places. But it was theirs. Emily taped Nathan's drawings to the refrigerator door, lit a candle in the evenings, and told herself it was enough. She picked up every freelance graphic design job she could find. Logo redesigns for local shops, website mock-ups for startups, even wedding invitations for strangers she'd never meet. The work wasn't glamorous, and the paychecks barely stretched to cover daycare, rent, and groceries, but there was pride in knowing she was standing on her own. Nights were the hardest. After Nathan went to bed, she'd sit at the kitchen table with her laptop glowing in the dark, chasing deadlines until her eyes blurred. Sometimes she cried quietly, careful not to wake him. Other times she scrolled through old photos, smiles that had once felt real, now tainted with betrayal. But slowly, something shifted. She began jogging in the mornings before Nathan woke up, earbuds in, lungs burning, telling herself with each mile, "You're stronger than this. You're stronger than him." Her body changed first, shoulders straighter, steps lighter. Then her spirit followed. By Nathan's 3rd birthday, Emily had created a new rhythm. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. It showed in little things, the way she laughed when Nathan smeared cake frosting on her cheek, the confidence in her voice when she pitched a design to a client, the quiet satisfaction when she mailed her rent check on time. Ryan, meanwhile, had faded into the background. Occasionally, his name would pop up, mutual friends whispering about his expensive dinners with Sabrina, the Instagram photos of their luxury vacations. Emily ignored it. She had no time for envy, no energy for comparisons. Until the day she ran into them in person. It was at the Glendale Farmers Market, a sunny Saturday morning. Emily and Nathan were browsing stalls, her son clutching a balloon shaped like a dinosaur, when a familiar laugh floated over the crowd. Ryan. He was standing by the bakery booth, Sabrina on his arm, both dressed like they were auditioning for a magazine cover. Ryan spotted her first. His smile faltered for a split second, then returned, wider, sharper. "Emily," he said, like they were old friends, like he hadn't shattered her. Sabrina's eyes flicked over Emily, lingering on her faded jeans, the flour smudge Nathan had left on her shirt. Then she smirked. Emily's chest tightened, heat rising in her face. For a moment, the old shame threatened to choke her. She could feel people around them watching, curious, waiting for drama. But then Nathan tugged her hand. "Mommy, can we get strawberries?" Emily knelt, brushing his hair back from his forehead. She smiled, really smiled, and said, "Of course we can." She turned back to Ryan, her voice calm. "Enjoy your day." And just like that, she walked away. No breakdown, no begging, no scene. It was a small victory. But for Emily, it was monumental. That victory lit something inside her. She started saying yes more often. Yes to networking events, where she connected with other designers and landed bigger projects. Yes to playdates, even when she felt like the odd mom out. Yes to herself, buying a dress she liked, splurging on a better coffee machine, daring to dream again. By the end of that year, her client list had doubled. Her bank account wasn't overflowing, but it wasn't empty either. She had stability, she had Nathan, and she had a sense of self she thought Ryan had stolen forever. Yet even as she rebuilt, there were nights she lay awake wondering if this was it. If she would always be defined by what she lost. If the shadow of Ryan Carter would follow her forever. But life has a way of surprising you. One ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Emily found herself at a design conference in downtown Los Angeles. She almost hadn't gone, the babysitter had canceled last minute, and she scrambled to find her neighbor to watch Nathan. But something told her to push through, to show up. She sat near the back, notebook open, when the keynote speaker walked on stage, a tall, confident man in a tailored suit, introduced as a tech entrepreneur funding innovative design startups. His name was Alexander Grant. Emily didn't know it then, but this encounter would tilt her entire story in a new direction. And eventually, it would lead her back to the very moment outside that country club, where Ryan Carter and Sabrina mocked her old car. Only this time, Emily wouldn't be the woman shrinking in shame. She'd be the woman the entire crowd turned to watch, when a billionaire pulled up in a limousine, just for her. The conference hall buzzed with polite applause as Alexander Grant walked across the stage. Tall, poised, with an easy confidence that filled the room, he didn't need to shout or gesture wildly. His voice alone carried weight, steady, calm, assured. Emily sat in the back row, pen tapping against her notebook. She wasn't here to be dazzled. She was here for information, maybe inspiration, and hopefully a few new contacts. But when Alexander began speaking, she couldn't help but listen. He didn't talk about money or power the way most entrepreneurs did. Instead, he spoke about design with purpose, about creating work that made lives easier, not just prettier. About valuing creators, not exploiting them. Emily found herself leaning forward. Her heart thudded with recognition, like he was putting into words the very things she'd whispered to herself during sleepless nights at her laptop. After the talk, a networking session began. People swarmed the stage, eager to pitch ideas, hand over business cards, snag a moment of his attention. Emily hesitated. She hated these rooms, everyone dressed sharper, talked louder, oozed confidence she never felt she had. But then she remembered the farmer's market. Nathan tugging her hand. The calm way she walked away from Ryan without flinching. She straightened her shoulders, clutched her portfolio, and stepped forward. When her turn came, she simply said, "Hi, I'm Emily Turner. I'm a freelance designer." Alexander's eyes flicked to hers. And instead of brushing her off with a polite nod, he asked, "What kind of design?" Her throat tightened. She forced herself to speak. Branding. Web layouts. Small businesses mostly. I try to create things that feel like people, not just products. He smiled. That's rare. Do you have examples? Emily handed over her portfolio. She expected him to glance, nod, and pass it back. But he didn't. He studied each page, lingering, asking questions. Why this font? What made you choose that color scheme? How did you approach this project with such a small budget? No one had ever taken her work that seriously before. Not even Ryan. By the end of the conversation, Alexander said something that made her chest tighten with disbelief. "I'd like to keep in touch. We're funding a few pilot projects. Someone with your vision could be a good fit." Emily walked out of the conference clutching his card like it was a golden ticket. The following weeks were a blur. Emails turned into coffee meetings. Coffee meetings turned into brainstorming sessions. Alexander wasn't just wealthy, he was present. He listened when Emily spoke, valued her ideas, and challenged her to think bigger. For the first time in years, she felt more than a single mom scraping by. She felt like a professional. Like a woman with a voice. And Nathan noticed too. "Mommy," he said one night as they sat eating pizza on the couch, "you smile more now." Emily blinked, caught off guard. She touched his cheek. "Do I?" He nodded. "I like it." Her throat tightened, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was from pride. Opportunities multiplied. With Alexander's backing, Emily began working on a project for a nonprofit, rebranding their entire image. The work was demanding, deadlines tight, but the pay was more than she'd ever earned. She upgraded her apartment, signed Nathan up for swim lessons, even bought herself a second-hand MacBook without guilt. Every step forward made Ryan feel smaller in her rearview mirror. But life has a way of circling back. One crisp evening, Emily and Alexander attended a charity dinner. It was a modest event compared to the gala-level spectacles Ryan loved, but Emily felt out of place anyway. She fussed with her navy dress, smoothing wrinkles, hoping she looked professional enough. When they walked into the ballroom together, conversations paused. Alexander was well known in these circles, respected, admired. Whispers followed him. "That's Grant. He's the one funding that new initiative." Emily tried to stay in the background. But Alexander made sure she didn't. "Everyone," he said as he introduced her to a group of board members, "this is Emily Turner, the designer behind the rebrand. She's the reason our campaign is connecting so well." Heat rushed to her cheeks. People smiled, shook her hand, asked her questions. For once, she wasn't invisible. And then she saw them. Across the room, Ryan and Sabrina stood at the bar. Ryan's eyes landed on Emily first. They widened, then narrowed. Sabrina followed his gaze, her lips curling. Emily's stomach flipped. For a split second, the old shame tried to creep back. What will they say? What will they do? But Alexander's hand was warm at her back. He leaned close, murmuring, "You belong here. Don't forget that." And something in Emily shifted again. She stood taller, met Ryan's gaze, and didn't look away. For the first time, he was the one unsettled. That night marked a turning point. Emily wasn't just surviving anymore. She wasn't even just rebuilding. She was rising. And while Ryan and Sabrina still lingered on the edges of her life, mocking, judging, waiting for her to stumble, they had no idea that the tables were about to turn in ways they couldn't imagine. Because humiliation in the valet line was only the beginning. The real reckoning hadn't even started yet. The night of the Bel Air Gala shimmered with every kind of excess. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across marble floors, champagne flowed like water, and the valet line looked like a car commercial for the world's elite. Emily adjusted the sleeve of her black evening dress, her pulse steady but strong. She wasn't here to impress Ryan. She wasn't here to compete with Sabrina. She was here as Alexander's guest, a professional in her own right. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The moment she stepped onto the red-carpeted entrance, Ryan's laugh cut through the noise. The same mocking tone she had endured in the valet line weeks before. "Well, look who it is," Ryan drawled, swirling his glass of champagne. "Still hanging around these circles, Em? I figured that Corolla of yours gave out by now." Sabrina clung to his arm, glittering in a gown designed to dazzle. Her smirk was almost rehearsed. "Emily, darling. I didn't realize they were letting freelancers in." How quaint. A ripple of laughter spread from their group, subtle but sharp, each chuckle like a dagger. Emily's chest tightened, but only for a moment. Then she breathed in, lifted her chin, and remembered. She remembered the nights she sat at her kitchen table, Nathan asleep in the next room, pushing through deadlines when she thought she had nothing left to give. She remembered Alexander's voice at the charity dinner, "You belong here." She remembered her son's words, "You smile more now, Mommy." She smiled. "Good to see you, Ryan," she said evenly. "Sabrina." Her calmness seemed to rattle them more than anger would have. Ryan blinked, his smirk faltering just a beat. And then headlights flashed at the curb. A sleek, jet-black limousine rolled to a stop. The crowd stirred, curiosity turning heads. The valet rushed to open the door. Out stepped Alexander Grant. Tall, poised, commanding, he wasn't just another wealthy guest. He was the guest. Conversations shifted, whispers flew. "That's Grant. He's backing half the projects in this city right now." He turned, offering his arm. "Emily," he said with warmth that carried across the marble, "sorry to keep you waiting." Emily's hand slid into his without hesitation. The effect was electric. Ryan's champagne glass stilled midair. Sabrina's smirk froze, then cracked. Alexander glanced at them briefly, polite but dismissive, before focusing entirely on Emily. "Shall we?" And just like that, the balance of power flipped. Inside the ballroom, Alexander introduced Emily not as a plus one, not as someone clinging to relevance, but as the designer who had spearheaded his latest campaign. "She's brilliant," he said to a circle of CEOs and investors. "The best eye for human-centered design I've ever seen." Every word was genuine, and every head turned toward Emily with newfound respect. Ryan and Sabrina, standing just close enough to overhear, looked stricken. Their whispers turned sharp, frantic. Emily caught Ryan's eyes once, saw the disbelief etched there. How did she get here? How did she move on without me? And she held his gaze. Not with anger. Not with gloating. Just with quiet certainty. You don't own me anymore. You never did. Later that night, as the valet pulled the limo around, Alexander excused himself to make a quick call. Emily waited at the curb, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. Ryan and Sabrina lingered nearby, pretending to wait for their car. Ryan couldn't help himself. So this is your new situation? He sneered, gesturing toward the limo. What's the plan, Em? Latch onto a billionaire now that you've played the single mom card long enough? Sabrina laughed under her breath, sharp and bitter. Emily turned slowly. Her voice was steady, even warm. No plan, she said. Just hard work. And respect. Two things you never gave me. And before Ryan could respond, the limo pulled up. The valet opened the door, bowing slightly. Alexander stepped out, smiling, his hand extended. Emily slipped inside, her head held high. The door closed softly behind her, shutting Ryan out completely. Through the tinted glass, she saw his face, stunned, pale, his jaw tight with humiliation. Sabrina hissed something sharp at him, her expression brittle. Emily leaned back against the leather seat, exhaling slowly. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest felt lighter. As the limo glided through Los Angeles, Alexander raised his glass. To new chapters, he said. Emily clinked hers gently against his. To rising, she whispered. And in that moment, she knew Ryan Carter's laughter would never haunt her again. Because she wasn't the woman he left behind. She was the woman who had risen higher than he could ever reach. The limo ride that night wasn't about luxury. It wasn't about the way the city lights scattered across the tinted glass or how the leather cushions seemed to cradle her exhaustion. It was about what it meant. For Emily, that quiet glide through Los Angeles wasn't measured in miles, it was measured in years. Years of struggle, sacrifice, and quiet resilience. Years of rebuilding from the ashes Ryan had left her in. She glanced at Alexander across the seat. He was speaking about a new project, a campaign that could reshape his company's future, but he paused when he saw her expression. You look lighter, he said softly. Emily smiled. I feel lighter. Later that night, after Alexander dropped her home, Emily stepped into the quiet of her apartment. Nathan's toys were scattered across the rug, and his small jacket hung crookedly from the hook by the door. She walked to his room, easing the door open just enough to peek inside. There he was, her son, curled up in his blanket, one arm wrapped around the stuffed bear he never let go of. His breaths came slow and steady, the sound of peace. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but not from sorrow. From relief. From joy. From the realization that everything she had endured, every cruel laugh, every lonely night, every slammed door, had carried her here. To this moment. To this safety. To this love. In the days that followed the gala, word spread quickly. The whisper circled back to her, how Ryan had turned pale when the limo door opened, how Sabrina's laughter had faltered, how Alexander had spoken of Emily with a respect no one could dismiss. For the first time in years, Emily wasn't a footnote in Ryan's story. Ryan was a footnote in hers. Ryan, meanwhile, found himself adrift. His smug confidence had cracked that night, and the cracks only deepened. Investors whispered about his arrogance, colleagues distanced themselves, and Sabrina's mask of composure slipped more each day. Emily didn't gloat. She didn't need to. His downfall wasn't her doing. His downfall was his reflection. And Emily? She was busy living. The real triumph wasn't the limo or the gala. It wasn't even Alexander, though she valued his partnership deeply. The real triumph was waking up in the morning and knowing she could provide for Nathan without fear. It was sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop open, designing campaigns that carried her name on them, not Ryan's. It was laughter, real laughter, returning to her home. One evening, Nathan climbed onto her lap, his little arms wrapping around her neck. "Mommy," he whispered, "you're the bravest person I know." Emily's throat tightened. She pressed her forehead against his. "I don't always feel brave," she said, her voice breaking just a little. Nathan shook his head with the stubborn certainty only a child could carry. "You are. You always are." That night, Emily sat alone for a while, a cup of tea cradled in her hands. She thought about the girl she had been, the girl who once believed Ryan's approval defined her worth. The girl who drove an old Corolla and swallowed humiliation just to keep the peace. She thought about how far that girl had come. And she whispered into the quiet, as though speaking to her younger self. "You were always enough. You just needed to see it." Months later, Emily attended another event with Alexander. This time, the limo wasn't a shock. It was simply transportation. The dresses, the chandeliers, the polite nods of powerful men, it all felt familiar now, but not overwhelming. Because Emily wasn't here to prove anything. She was here because she belonged. As she and Alexander mingled, she caught a glimpse of Ryan across the room. His suit was less tailored, his smile tighter. Sabrina wasn't with him. For a brief moment, their eyes met. But this time, Emily didn't feel a flicker of hurt, or anger, or even triumph. She felt nothing at all. And that nothing was everything. Because indifference was the final step in freedom. When she and Alexander left the gala that night, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Emily Carter's story wasn't about Ryan anymore. It was about resilience. About rising. About carving out a life where laughter echoed through her apartment, where her son grew up knowing strength didn't come from wealth or power, it came from surviving betrayal and building anew. And as the limo pulled away once more, Emily rested her head against the seat, her son's laughter waiting for her at home, and thought. The past doesn't define me. The future does. Emily's journey proves that betrayal doesn't have the final word, resilience does. If her story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs hope today. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment you realized your past no longer defined you?